Some people don't raise their voice, don't insult you, don't do anything wrong, and still leave you feeling like you need to lie down afterward. You finish the call and your body feels heavier. You close the chat and your chest feels tight. You walk away from the conversation and it's like your energy got quietly siphoned. Not in a dramatic way, but in that slow, dull way that makes you wonder if you're just becoming fragile. And because nothing obvious happened, you start turning the blame inward. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm not built for people. Maybe I'm selfish for needing space. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe I'm the problem. But your body keeps telling the truth in the only language it can. Depletion. Not sadness. Not anger. Depletion. So here's the question that stops the spiral and starts the real seeing. What if you're not drained because you're bad at relationships? What if you're drained because you've been participating in exchanges that keep taking from you, and your nervous system is finally refusing to call it love? Because there's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from life being busy. It comes from connection being unfair. You know the pattern, even if you've never named it as a pattern. You're the one who checks in first. You're the one who remembers the details. You're the one who holds the space, asks the questions, offers the reassurance, translates the emotion, softens the tone, makes it safe. You're the one who can tell when someone is off, and you adjust yourself automatically because you can't help it. You've been trained to sense shifts and prevent explosions, to keep peace by carrying weight early. And in certain relationships, that skill becomes your job. You listen to the same story again. You absorb the same crisis again. You respond to the same emotional weather again. You offer the same comfort again. And the whole time, you're quietly hoping something will appear on the other side of your giving. Curiosity about you. Care for you. Accountability, reciprocity, even a simple, honest question. How are you really? But it doesn't come. Or it comes in a thin form that doesn't feed you. And because you don't want to be someone who keeps score, you keep swallowing the feeling that you are being used. You tell yourself you're just compassionate. You tell yourself this is what love looks like. You tell yourself everyone is struggling, and you should be grateful you can help. Then resentment starts forming under the surface, like a bruise you can't see. Not because you're cruel, but because your body knows something your mouth keeps denying. You are giving beyond what is being returned. And that's when the worst feeling arrives. Guilt. Guilt for needing balance. Guilt for wanting it to be mutual. Guilt for feeling tired of being the one who carries. Because you've been taught that your needs are negotiable, but your kindness is mandatory. Here's the quiet truth that changes the meaning of everything. The relationships that drain you are rarely mysterious. They are often predictable economies. In some connections, your presence is treated like a resource and not a person. Your listening becomes a service. Your empathy becomes a supply. Your flexibility becomes a convenience. Your forgiveness becomes a renewable coupon. And you may not even notice it at first, because it doesn't start as exploitation. It starts as closeness. It starts as being needed. It starts as being the safe person, the reliable person, the one who understands. It starts as the role you learned to play so you could belong. Then, slowly, the exchange rate changes. Your giving becomes expected. Their receiving becomes normal. Your boundaries become mood. Your limits become distance. Your needs become drama. And because you want to keep the connection, you keep paying the emotional bill. This is the moment where value exchange dynamics becomes the lens, not as a money concept, but as a relational truth. Value exchange. Dynamic says something that can feel confrontational until it feels liberating. Every relationship has an exchange, even when nobody names it. Time, attention, care, labor, emotional presence, reliability, protection, forgiveness. These are currencies. When the flow becomes one-directional, the relationship may remain friendly, but your body will start treating it like debt. And debt always collects interest. That interest looks like fatigue, irritation, numbness, withdrawal, dread before contact, a shorter fuse, a heavier heart. Not because you suddenly became mean, because your system is keeping you alive. It's trying to stop the leak. So if you've been feeling drained, it may not be because you need to communicate better. It may be because you've outgrown the kind of closeness that requires your self-erasure to stay stable. And the moment you see it as exchange, you stop calling your depletion random. You start calling it information. Value exchange. Dynamics isn't a trendy mindset phrase. It sits on a very old human instinct. Reciprocity is how trust survives. Long before modern therapy, language, communities understood that when exchange becomes chronically imbalanced, it fractures the social fabric. Early trade systems, gift economies, and community survival all relied on something simple. Giving needed an answer, not always identical, but honest and proportional. When taking became entitlement, relationships broke, not because people were petty, but because systems can't survive long-term extraction. Ethical economics later wrestled with the same principle in another form. What is fair exchange? And what happens when one party gains stability by draining another party's capacity to live? Even the word debt carries moral and relational weight historically, because debt was never only numbers. Debt was obligation. Debt was power. Debt was the slow shaping of one person's future by another person's need. Now bring that history into modern relationships, and you can finally name what your body has been reacting to. You're not just tired. You're in relational debt. You can see it in friendships where one person uses the other as an emotional landfill. They only reach out when they're spiraling, and the conversation becomes a one-way funnel. Their feelings, their crisis, their validation. The moment you speak about your own life, they pivot back to themselves, not always maliciously, sometimes just habitually. You leave those conversations with a strange fog, like your nervous system did hours of labor without pay. You can see it in family systems where one member is assigned the role of emotional caretaker, the adult child who manages the parent's moods, the sibling who keeps everyone calm, the person who gets called selfish, the moment they stop being available. The exchange is built into the family structure. You provide stability. They provide approval. The moment you stop paying, the system accuses you of betrayal. You can see it in romantic dynamics too, especially when one partner becomes the relationship's regulator. One person tracks the emotional climate, initiates repair, explains needs, remembers patterns, and holds the weight of making it work, while the other stays passive, dismissive, or perpetually overwhelmed. The relationship doesn't end because there's no love. It strains because love has turned into labor for one person and comfort for the other. And you can see it culturally in how people are trained to treat availability as kindness. The always replying friend, the always on coworker, the person who answers immediately, even while they're drowning. Modern life rewards the one who gives without friction, and then acts surprised when that person collapses. This is why you feel drained after certain conversations. Your body isn't confused. Your body is doing math. It's noticing that the exchange is not sustaining you. And when your body starts doing math, it's usually because your mouth has been too loyal to politeness to tell the truth. So what restores the balance without turning you into someone you don't want to be? It starts with a quiet inventory of where you are overpaying. Not morally, energetically. Notice which relationships leave you calmer and which leave you clenched. Notice which conversations feel mutual and which feel like you were recruited into a job you didn't apply for. Your body's dread is not a personality flaw. It's a signal that the exchange is expensive. Then practice fewer words, not more. When you're used to overgiving, you often try to fix imbalance by explaining it perfectly. But over-explaining is a form of self-abandonment when it's used to earn permission. Clean exchange doesn't require a speech. It requires a boundary that can survive discomfort. Sometimes the most powerful sentence is simple. I can't hold that today. Or, I want to support you, but I need it to be mutual. Or, I have 10 minutes and then I need to go. Clarity is not cruelty. It's honesty without performance. Let the relationship reveal itself after the boundary. Not to make anyone a villain, but to collect truth. Do they respect it and adjust, even awkwardly? Do they punish you with guilt, withdrawal, or anger? Do they ignore the line and push again? Value exchange. Dynamics teaches that boundaries aren't only protection, they are information. They reveal what the relationship is actually built on. Also, stop rescuing people from the consequences of their own emotional patterns. Rescuing feels like love, but it can become enabling when it prevents growth. If someone always vents and never changes, your constant holding becomes part of the cycle. Pulling back isn't abandonment when your presence has been turned into a pressure valve. And finally, give your care a home. Many people don't need to become less compassionate. They need to become more selective. Your empathy is not meant to be scattered across people who treat it like entitlement. Place it where it returns as warmth, where it grows trust, where it creates mutuality. Care that comes back to you is not selfishness. It's sustainability. These adjustments don't require you to become hard. They require you to stop confusing depletion with love. Here's what starts changing inside you when the exchange becomes clean. Before, you lived with a quiet bracing around certain names on your phone. You answered quickly to prove you were good. You stayed longer to prove you cared. You listened past your limits and then felt resentful, then hated yourself for resenting. You called it loyalty, but your body called it drain. You were constantly negotiating between being kind and being alive. After, a different emotional climate forms. You feel calmer because your boundaries stop making you the villain in your own story. You feel trust returning because you keep agreements with yourself instead of abandoning yourself for approval. You feel clarity because you can finally tell which connections are mutual and which are transactional. And you feel self-respect because you stop paying relational debt with your health. The most surprising shift is how love starts feeling lighter again, not because you love less, but because you're no longer carrying two people emotionally just to keep the connection intact. Transformation is internal first. It begins the moment you stop calling fairness selfish and start calling it the only kind of connection that can last. If you're honest, which relationship leaves you most drained afterward? And what part of the exchange is one-sided right now? Time, emotional labor, reassurance, availability, forgiveness. What would a single clean boundary sound like if you treated reciprocity as love, not as a luxury? When your kindness becomes unpaid labor, your soul will eventually invoice you through resentment, because love that requires self-erasure isn't love. It's extraction, dressed up as closeness. If this episode named what you've been carrying, share in the comments the first place you noticed the drain and what fair exchange would look like for you this week. Subscribe for more episodes that decode relationship patterns with grounded clarity, so your love can stay soft without your spine disappearing.